Hey Cindy, welcome to the show.
Hey Brittany, hi. So excited to be here.
Are you still recovering from like Thanksgiving, hangovers and hangovers,
Yeah.
all the things?
Yeah, I think I finally learned and not ate too much in my first go. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I've definitely learned my lesson over the years too. This year had pretty moderate one. I was able to say, you know what, just go for the leftovers.
for sure, for sure. Well
Um,
into December. That's the leftovers.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I am really excited to have you on the show. Let's start with your background. Our listeners always love to learn a little bit more about our interviewee, our guest. And so, can you tell us like where you're from? What did you study? Tell us about your story.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Beijing and grew up in Vancouver, beautiful Vancouver, Canada, and currently living in San Francisco. So yeah, I have lived in quite a few places in my life. And originally, you reached out to me to learn about my experience as a FemTech founder of my startup called Vitalyware. So for Vitalyware, it was a startup that I founded that created a wearable bra for stress management based on sensing the vital signs from our heart. So some of the metrics that was being used there was the physiological coherence from heart rate variability. So I thought maybe the audience of your
Dang.
podcast is familiar with some more technical things.
Yeah.
So the inspiration of that whole product and startup was really came from my background as an engineer and yoga instructor. And really the mission was to bring yoga off the mat into everyday life, as well as destigmatizing mental health.
Mm.
So, as I was teaching yoga, I always just noticed there's always students, back in the day in the studios that leaves halfway through Savasana and just went off to hustle and grind, right? So
Yeah. And what's
that's
Savasana? That's the part where you lay at the
that's a
end.
court post. That's at the very end when you've done all your work, and now it's really about integrating the practice, and then hopefully you take some of that right back
Yeah.
to your everyday life as opposed to back to your regular patterns.
Yeah.
So and I have to say, even in my own life, I caught myself doing that kind of
Mhm.
immediately after I leave my practice off the mat. Into the everyday life, and I just became anxious and kind of stressy again.
Yeah.
So that's really the inspiration and of the startup, and the product that got created out of that was a smart bra. Um, so that was that chapter of my life that kind of got me on this podcast. But as we've been kind of back and forth, that I've explained that I actually moved on from the startup, but now I'm really excited about how kind of I went from a femtech founder into coaching on the same mission.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited to hear about this feminine energy coach. I'm so excited to hear about it. But you have a really unique story of having had a femtech company that you're no longer pursuing. It pivoted, it changed, right? And so we have a lot of aspiring founders, current founders that are listeners, and sometimes it's so hard to accept the fact that your company may not work out, right? It is so hard to realize that it's just the pieces aren't coming together. So I actually think it's really inspiring, your story there. Can you tell us a little bit more about like how long did you spend on making that bra, like time wise, and did you like invest your own money into it? Like how far along did you get, and at what point did you know like it wasn't working out, you had to change?
Mm. Yeah, so I really started it. The ideation of that was end of 2015. So, that's kind of, think back a couple years back, wearable was really hot at that time, right? And, Fitbit was doing really, really well. There's Pebble, there's Jawbone, there's all those companies that half of them no longer exist, basically. So it was kind of really started at the end of the high of the wearable,
Mm.
this whole wearable wave. Yeah, and but to me, it was less about really, this thing was super hot. Investors liked it. It was more about that I had this mission to really bring something I love off the mat into everyday life, and I really believed in it, like wholeheartedly, 100%. And my whole journey with Vitally really lasted 3 years, a little bit more than 3 years, and and I had to say that, it was tough. Building your company is always tough, but I just believed in it so much that even when the time got really hard, and I was broke basically from doing this
Yep.
company,
Yep.
but I believed in so much that I just just throw myself in, and I just really saw it to the end,
Mm-hmm.
um, until I realized that I had to move on and
Yeah.
do something else. But I think the fact that it was so dear to my heart, this mission,
Mm-hmm.
um, is really the reason that I went as far as I did.
Yeah.
Both with kind of internally and as a woman, as well as the level of support I've received from outside.
Yeah. And what was that moment? Was it that you didn't have the money to manufacture it, or was it that the market wasn't actually interested in that product, or what was the, Achilles heel of it that you figured, okay, even if I love this, it's not, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, so I'm gonna back up a little bit on this just
Uh-huh.
to kind of give you a full picture of kind of what I went through, kind of
Okay.
on the inside, right?
Yeah.
As a founder of that company. So, I mean, on the outside, I was really kind of living this glorious life as a STEM star, right? This engineer, yoga instructor made a smart bra. It was like there's a lot of
Yeah.
PR. There's a lot of kind
Yeah.
of recognitions I got from this endeavor. So I was this STEM star and this fierce female founder following her dreams, empowering other women, and just stigmatizing mental health, right? This is quite
Mm-hmm.
newsworthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a story. But on the inside, honestly, I was going through this endless cycles of burnout, right? And
Yeah.
really, despite doing everything in my capacity to fix, to control, to improve, I did it all, anything you can think of. And the most ironic thing is I was actually not able to manage my own stress with the product I created. I think not looking back, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then I just kind of lived through the pendulum of burnout for 3 years and
Yeah.
working like 10 plus hours a day, 7 days a week, right? This kind of very hustle and grind pattern that I was in. And I was
Mm-hmm.
constantly traveling back in the days when we could travel, right?
Yep.
Just chasing all the shiny things, right? Yeah, it's and it really kind of took me running myself to the ground to realize that I was on full throttle masculine energy. Even though on the surface I was a female founder, female product,
Yeah.
obviously a bra, right?
Yeah.
And female audience, but my execution and expression of it was so masculine. And I was just kind of trying to live up to this success image that's painted by a very outcome and material driven values of our very hyper masculine time. So
Cindy,
ultimately, yeah.
Cindy. This is an amazing story, and I do not wish that experience upon anybody. Our listeners, most of them know I'm a serial entrepreneur, and my last company was a DNA based dating app called Faramore. And I relate so much to your story because what a PR story, a geneticist who's going to help you find love through science. And I was one of the early founders in the Houston startup scene. So I was like this little star, and I was young woman, like diverse
Mm,
team. And we got all the PR all over the world. I mean, we were on like BBC, like my voice was translated into all these languages, but on the inside, I was dying. Like at night, I would lay there and my heart was like palpitating,
mm,
and I couldn't find love myself. So it's
yes.
like
Oh,
the
giving me so
whole
much
moral of the
goosebumps.
story is like I was alone and stressed, and it was I felt fraudulent, with everyone looking in being like, wow, you're so successful. And I was like, if you only knew like what it's really like on the inside. So I have so much empathy for your story, and I'm so grateful that like you did it and you learned a lot. And now you're like moving on to, you know, more holistic things. Like me, I'm now in FemTech Focus and I'm like, this is amazing. Soothes my soul. Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well,
Yeah, wow. It's really, it resonates with a lot of women, I have to say, especially in
yeah.
tech, you know, because
Yes.
I see this pattern over and over again now as a coach as well, that, we're just we're very masculine as women these days. Um, yeah, but I'm extremely grateful for, the 3 years that of what I did to
Mm-hmm.
myself, right?
Yep.
Because it really, now looking back, I had to go through that to be where I am today,
That's
to,
right.
to be telling the story, to be vulnerable, and to, use my voice to inspire.
110%. I cannot tell founders that they should take my opinion seriously unless I live their life. Right.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So now you're a feminine energy coach. What is that?
Yes. So, picking back on our story, right? So I was
Uh-huh.
completely exhausted by my masculine energy, this hustling, this fighting, this controlling, have to, do everything. Um, it kind of really took me to the very last resort to even allow some feminine things to shine through, right? And that was expressed in the nurturing, the deep compassion and acceptance, and first and foremost towards myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it really hit a rock bottom after my company. So but it was inevitable for me to really ditch this very technology and solution outcome driven brain to, really commit to my inner growth, to embrace what I later learned to be feminine energy, ultimately become a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So femininity is one of the most misrepresented and misunderstood values in our hypermasculine time. It is. So femininity is really just expression of feminine energy, right? It's more about the state of being, as opposed to doing, and in the state of flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm just gonna wait a second for that to land. So a state of flow is effortless. It's
Mm-hmm.
effortless. You're just kind of really in the wholesomeness, in the present moment, in the mind and body, and yeah, and things start happening.
Yeah.
Kind
And I
of.
just want to like clarify because I've
Mhm.
I've worked on and talked about energies in my past, but for our listeners, just want to clarify like this isn't about man versus woman, right? Because
Mhm.
women can have masculine and feminine energy. Men can have masculine and feminine energy, right? So it's not about
Absolutely.
genders. It's just about like a set of typical ways of living, right? That are we classify as masculine or feminine.
Yeah, so I like to explain this. When I talk about masculine and feminine energy, they're the energetic polarity, right?
Okay, yeah.
This so instead of the female and male, those are genders, and you're absolutely correct. Both men and women need masculine and feminine energy. The makeups is slightly different,
Mm-hmm.
but we absolutely need both to be in a state of balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and that's why I say you can't really fix your way into balance, right? Because if you're someone who's like really about the fixing and the controlling and the masculine, then you need to bring in the being, the nurturing, and the resting in order to bring yourself into balance.
Yeah. Well, I usually think of like masculine energy as being like while you're at work and the feminine energy being like on the weekends when you're taking a hike. So like, but how else do these energies show up? Like, does feminine energy show up in work? Like, does masculine energy show up at home? Like, can you tell us more about how does it show up in society?
Yeah. So femininity, the feminine energy is really expressed as in really living in the moment, right? And
Mm.
what that means is that if you think you're in the moment, you're probably not in the moment, right? It's to be really present, you need both the mind and body, um, you know, uh, uh, in the same space. But often, our mind is like really concerned with something that happened in the past, processing information, analyzing, really kind of stuck with the past that it's really hard for our mind to be in the present moment. And then, also the mind likes to worry about the future as well, kind of based on what happened in the past. So it's kind of like energetically, that's like a whiplash, like all the time in our mind, but our body is always present, right? Our body is trying to talk to us too, right? There's lots of sensations we can feel, when someone's actually present. But we're very, very consumed. Our attention's given to the mind, to the past, in particular, to be really present. So, this is really the premise for the feminine energy to flow, is to be present, right? And to be aware of what's happening. And then, the awareness, from awareness arises compassion and being nurturing this very motherliness, right? Towards ourselves, towards others. And then creativity is also extremely feminine, right? It's not, creativity really in its ultimate form is another human being, right? And that power is in the women's body, is in the womb. So yeah, it's extremely powerful and extremely wise, the feminine energy. And and really a key piece of this feminine is that it's quite holistic, as everything I've talked about. So it's holistic, but it's also very aligned internally. So it's very grounded in our inner strength.
I feel like we default to the masculine and then have to work really hard to get into the feminine. Is that just like my paradigm and like the people I interact with? Or are there people that are like always in the feminine and have to work on getting into the masculine?
Yeah. So we live in a patriarchy society, I think it's pretty obvious that that's how we live. And even just throughout the duration of even the human written history, we've been kind of putting down femininity and putting masculinity on a pedestal, right? So it's really no surprise that, masculinity became just the standard of society today, right? Humans, whether they're men or women, they were really kind of taught to be masculine from a very young age. And survival, your survival depends on the competition, or being competitive. So, a lot of these very kind of more instinctual and survival based beliefs kind of really got into us from a very young age.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is why this is just kind of got hardwired, right, into our brain. It just kind of and it was really hard to start realizing that. It really kind of took me, where it took me before I had, at the beginning of my awakening. So, this kind of masculine pattern of constantly efforting, having to push through, having to hustle, having control, having to analyze everything, and seeking external validations, that's kind of very ego-driven patterns. When the masculinity just inflated, right? Kind of that became a huge ego. And and all these patterns is causing, individually, also collectively as a society, a lot of problem these days.
Yeah. Well, it's the words you're using is so funny. So, FemTech Focus, we're raising a venture fund. And so I'm going to these conferences and events around like, how do you raise funding from limited partners? And the limited partners are like, we always look for hustle. We look for the people with the edge. We look for people that can win the deal, So like, I am now like hearing the words you're saying and I'm like, oh God, like they're just looking for masculine energy. So my question to you now is, because we have investors and startup founders and, startup team members listening to the show, how can they integrate feminine energy into something that is so intense, like a startup or investments? Do you have any tips for us?
Yeah. So the thing with masculine and feminine is that the masculine is always going to be more apparent, right? It's always out there, it's constant, right? It's kind of think about the sun. That's like a kind of metaphor for masculine energy. It's always there, right? So that's why it's really easy for us to understand, to interpret it, and to want it. But with the feminine, it's kind of more like the moon, right? The moon is kind of more like mysterious. It's more like hidden. It kind of wanes and wax. It does in cycles. It's cyclic. It's not always constant. So the thing is, we really, femininity is really, the feminine and the masculine, they're polarities, right? They're really, let's be a little bit philosophical here first. And nature always creates check and balance, right? It creates there's light, there's dark, there's day, there's night, there's sun, there's moon, and there's masculine, there's feminine, and how they check and balance is by being equal in power. But the thing is, the feminine power is not as apparent. So let's just establish that first. And the thing is, women or, people who identify as women who are really truly stand up in their feminine energy is such a rarity, right? The usual femininity we see, that like in today's society is a wounded version of femininity, as a result of it being so pushed down for thousands of years, for the duration of written history. So, as a result, our collective femininity is actually pretty wounded. It is weak. It literally is, people will probably tell you femininity is weak, stop being a woman, right? Words like that. And, there's guilt and shame associated with that expression as women.
Yeah.
But the thing is, as women, it's our birthright. Like femininity is our birthright. But just the fact that it's became something so foreign for a lot of women, and the younger version of myself included, is very, very empowering.
Yeah. So
unless we can start reclaiming that, to really stand on our 2 feet and grounded and rooted in our femininity, it's, whatever we create out there, the impact, the product, it's going to carry that energy. And there's nothing really more empowering for women collective, for humanity collectively, for women to stand in our own power. So this is like a long way to answer your question, but I truly believe, as a coach and now as a voice for the feminine, is really for the women startup founders, women in tech, investors, to really start to heal our feminine.
What does it look like to see somebody standing it up in their femininity? Like, how would I identify that and be like, dang, she's in her femininity energy, right? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, so I love that question. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 examples and see, which one resonate.
Okay.
So, because this kind of very divine, this very pure femininity, it's just so lost in our society. So, a good place to look for example is actually in the myth. And there's lots of like really powerful feminine figures, that's still kind of by word of mouth or anything that really passed down for like generations. Greek mythology is a great place that I look for, powerful feminine figures. And just think about like the array of goddesses in mythology, right? Some are really smart, some can fight. Some are very, sensual, they're really tapped into their body and their senses. And there's also very powerful mothers and daughters, right? They're like the whole array of the feminine expressions. And if we were to combine them into one, that's really the ultimate feminine power, right? It's really, yeah, think about her presence, right? She just descend down from the sky. She doesn't have to explain herself. She doesn't have to comply to anyone. Her true essence of her, that's it. She doesn't have to say a word. That's really powerful, and it's just, there's no need for validation. She doesn't have to look a certain way. She is her, just powerful as she is.
And she knows it, right? Like there's no, like, she's not questioning her voice. She's like, this is what it is.
Yes. This wholesomeness, that's really, a powerful image.
Yeah.
And a real life version, like I often think of the Queen Elizabeth.
Okay, yeah.
She is extremely powerful, right? And the same with her presence. When she show up, she doesn't have to start explaining herself, start like pleasing you, start, doing all those things that most women step into a room have to do, trying to be agreeable, right?
Yeah.
Or please somebody. it's our presence, and she show up when she show up, and just stand in her power and authority.
I
So
feel like Michelle Obama is like
yes,
that.
yes, that's
I
another
love
example.
Michelle so much.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
yeah, and like I love The Crown, the TV show as well on Netflix, and just kind of watching how how the queen grew into her
Yeah.
power as well is extremely empowering. And you find a lot of parallels between these truly powerful women who can be vulnerable but also extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that so much. So, do you have like two or three like activities that you can suggest? And I'm selfishly asking for myself as well. For how can I step in my femininity? And, and listeners, remember, even if you're a dude, these are tips that you should be doing too. It's not about gender, it's about energies and different like ways of living and expressing yourself. So, Cindy, do you have like two or three like activities or suggestions for us to do?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually have a whole like cheat sheet of that that you can find. Maybe I'll provide you a link to that. It's like completely
Yes,
free resources I put out there.
awesome.
And the cheat sheet I put together is actually ways to raise your feminine energy in under 10 minutes. Because a lot of my audience, they're really busy. They're
Yeah,
so
girl.
occupied, committed, want to do everything full plate.
Yep.
I see you, I got you. So the way my cheat sheet is organized, so there's like different ways there's physical ways you can raise feminine energy, there's mental ways, right? There's more spiritual ways as well. Just because energy really transcends, its energy is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's connected. That's a good thing. So if you focus on one thing, it does start, really a ripple effect.
Yeah.
So I think if I were to recommend a couple, the number one thing I like to recommend is really having a gratitude practice.
Mm.
Yeah, because gratitude is really this one magical thing that brings us to the present moment, right? When we're
Yeah.
thankful, when we're like giving gratitude to something, even if it's the smallest thing, right? Having clean air to breathe. I'm in California, and this year, that really became a blessing during the summer.
Yeah.
So really, that when someone's grateful, you're not afraid, you don't feel lack, right? You're truly in the present moment, and and this gratitude also is very expansive. It's actually quite divine. This goddess energies to be expansive, to think, to be grateful. So, and I recommend having a gratitude journal. And it
Yeah.
really can be like just a couple of things, right? But just keeping track of that. And also, like after you do that, bring that sense of gratitude into your engagement with other people. Like I'm extremely grateful to be here to talk to you, Brittany, and to share my story on this platform. And it really comes through when someone's being
Yeah.
grateful
Yeah.
and talking to you.
I feel like the best team leaders are ones that, tell their team, I can't do this without you. I'm so
Yes.
grateful for you, and
Yes.
um, I feel like I do that with my team and it's not even something that I consciously have to try to do because I legitimately am so grateful for my team. But I feel like, and maybe people think it's weak to, as a leader, show that amount of gratitude, say the words, I couldn't do this without you, whereas I'm like, that's just the truth, I don't feel weak about saying that. That's the truth.
Yeah, that's just the regular ego coming out trying to sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so gratitude lists, and how about one more for us?
Yeah. So, there's so many.
Oh,
Okay. I'm gonna give you this one because you can't, this is not literally doesn't add any time into your day, but when you
okay.
take showers,
Uh-huh.
just feel the skin, feel the heat, feel, the difference it creates in your body, and
Yeah.
be fully present showering. Yeah.
I love that. The shower, I come up with a lot of ideas in the shower. I often preface
Mm-hmm.
things with like, so when I was in the shower this morning, I thought blah, 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 you know? But one thing I was suggested was to actually like, if my mind, because some days I wake up, my mind is just totally racing. And so it was suggested to me, like when I'm washing my hair, to like imagine I'm actually washing out the thoughts and like feel it being scrubbed and then like like watered out and like down the drain, and like to visualize that. And
Yeah.
that's being present, right? Even if you're like kind of think, not just being like, this is my hair, but if you can kind of visualize something else on top of it.
Yep, great, Brittany. That's the next level. Visualizing.
I've been to a lot of therapy.
Taking a shower in a waterfall, some
Yeah.
fairies around.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love it. I love it. Well, I have another question for you, which is, we are like a health and wellness podcast. So I know the answer is yes, but does feminine energy affect your health, whether you have a lot of it or not a lot of it, positive or negative to your health? And like, in what ways would that manifest in your body, in your health and wellness? So therefore, like people that are like, this is useless information, hopefully this will convert them to be like, oh, this actually has an impact on my health and wellness. Do you have what's your feedback on that?
Yeah. So, these days I don't hook sensors on myself anymore to keep track and to really, to show you the proof. But honestly, like I'm in my best health for the past 10 years. And I would even say, the example I give is that I used to do a lot of yoga, as I've already said, but my way of approaching yoga was so masculine that I was hurting myself. I was really pushing my body to do these poses because of my ego, right?
Yep.
Because of my masculine energy, which is not checked. Even though I'm saying, okay, just listen to your body, but I honestly, my energy was not there. I wasn't doing that. I wasn't doing what I was saying, what I was preaching. So, yeah, it's really, the feminine energy is really truly healing and transformative. Because it's so nurturing, so much love, it's this motherly kind of love that we all crave, from a very young age. So, and, I have to say I have I have coaching clients who are in therapy, who are really seeking a way of healing, because, they probably realize they need a healing because of some health issues, when they're just, mentally in a rut, or, physically they're starting to feel pain because they've really ignored all these signals the body's trying to communicate over the years, just being so stuck in the head. And really bringing the feminine energy is it's transformative. It really heals.
Yeah.
It makes someone feel full, to feel like wholesome. Yeah, and yeah, it's I think a lot of like holistic approaches, like we in the health and wellness space, our thoughts, it's considered kind of this kind of primary type of food in holistic nutrition, and then the food you actually put in your mouth is actually secondary, right? And the reason being that, like our thoughts actually carries a lot of energy, right? Our energy actually follows our thought. And if our thoughts are very toxic, or beating ourselves up, or not being compassionate and nurturing towards ourselves, that energy kind of gets amplified in our body.
Yeah.
So, by inviting in the feminine energy, it's because energy really transcends. It affects the thoughts, right? It affects it's going to change how you feel. And it's going to start clearing something up. So,
I feel like, as you're answering this question, I was thinking to myself, like, the answer to this is similar to how you can describe the masculine and feminine energy. Like the masculine is like, here's this checklist, and the feminine energy is like kind of this elusive sensation. And so when I think about how do these energies affect my health, for the masculine energy, I think about like, I had a broken bone and now it's fixed, or I had a wound and now it's healed, And for feminine energy, I'm asking myself, how has feminine energy helped my wellness and health? I think about like less racing thoughts. I think about, less stomach aches. I think about like my jaw isn't as tight. So it's not as like you have to actually think about it. Like what has changed, you know? And it's like, oh yeah, like until I started to notice my body, like those are things that really, you know, were a part of my everyday life, right?
Yeah, totally.
Hmm. Well, what's
State
your
of being.
what are your future goals for your business with the feminine energy coach?
Yeah, for sure. So really for me to step into this role as a not just a coach but feminine energy coach is really ultimately to shift our culture. I really see that as a lifelong mission of mine, both when I was making bras to now I'm coaching women. And how I want to do that is to really help women succeed, but not
Wow.
succeeding in the masculine way, how I did, how I tried
Yeah.
and got super burned out from, but really kind of succeeding in this 5D way that I call it. So this 5D way being, rooted in femininity as a source of power and creating work-life energy balance with purpose, abundance, and freedom. And and most importantly, without sacrificing lifestyle goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think this is really important for women these days because, we have such high expectations of ourselves
Oh
and
yeah.
we're taking on so much, right? But a lot of us are really sacrificing our own health and well-being
Yep.
to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to coach, a collective of women who are successful, in a different way it's really going to shift something in our culture. I believe that, and is really will change our values yeah, and success really just becomes a non-negotiable thing. We have to you know we have to get there in a feminine way for each other, but not against each other.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. You're bringing up so much for me because, you know, my PhD was in genetics, but what I studied was how stress causes cancer, you know,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
on a cellular level, you know,
Yeah.
that cells can sense stress and like it literally mutates your DNA. And that's how you get cancer is because of stress. And so, but yet then after my PhD, I started a startup and I got so stressed my hair was falling out. So apparently I didn't listen to my own PhD thesis. You know, it still took me some time.
Oh,
Oh man.
give me
Um,
goosebumps again.
yeah, yeah. Learning progress in progress. All right. We have two last questions that our listeners love to hear. So if someone wanted to start a femtech company, what areas in women's health and wellness do you think still need innovating?
Hmm. Okay. So a big part, I think, is actually community building. Even though that doesn't seem directly related to health and wellness, but if we think about feminine energy, a lot of it is about building community, right? We're in community, women. We're supporting each other and we're creating connections. And I think that just I feel like technology has not really gone in that direction, but
Mm-hmm.
in the opposite direction to isolate us, to kind of put us in front of screens and into bubbles,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm not really well versed in the research on this, but I can tell from my own experience, it really affects kind of my health, not being able to kind of be in each other's energy in a very connective and supportive way. So really, I think like how can technology actually, create like maybe a digital version of like Women's Circle, something like
Yeah.
that, to really bring us together in a very, this kind of private and intimate experience
Mm-hmm.
that we can just come together to empower and elevate each other. Um, yeah, I think that's really gonna be a game changer, especially, moving forward from 2020,
Oh yeah. Yep. How do
Um,
you foster connection and
yeah.
community? I
Hmm.
love it. And what do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
Inner work and transformation.
Inner work and transformation. I love
Yeah.
it. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like I think of myself as a high impact woman, and I
Mhm.
think probably most people in this audience are high impact humans, right?
Yep.
Women,
Yep.
women and men, and anywhere in between. So But the thing is, when we talk about creating impact, is amplifying our energy outwards, right? That's essentially what we're trying to do. And I was kind of alluding to this earlier before. If our own energy is not grounded and wholesome, what we're amplifying out, it's a reflection of that, and it's actually gonna really enlarge, amplify, the fear and the lack that we feel from our essence, right? So really, I think creating impact really from starting from each individual completely owning their story, owning their energy, and owning their healing and transformation, and then from like a very 100% love and acceptance and respect to ourselves, that can start radiating and start creating impact outside.
Cindy, I am gonna definitely go grab my yoga mat after this. Do some namaste for me, like this has been super, super inspiring and a great reminder for me. And I hope for a lot of our listeners that your self-care is so important if you're gonna improve other people's health and wellness, right? You got to do your own health and wellness. And this is really, really important stuff. So thank you so much for your time today, Cindy.
Yeah, well, my mission is to bring the yoga outside the mat into everyday life. Everyday life is where the challenge is at.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, let's get it on. Love you, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany.